Alright, so let's get into my review of The Batman. Alright, so first of all, I love the red. Reminds me of Batman the Animated Series. So first let's start off with my favorite things that are not characters. So first thing is Gotham itself. I felt that Gotham really for the first time in a long time really was a character of its own. I think in the Burton movies it's a character of its own, but I don't think the practical effects of that has aged particularly well. I think that's probably the part of those movies that has aged the worst. So it was nice to see a realistic Gotham that was just really dirty and grimy. They like made up their own, drug drops, and I just really appreciated a lot of the attention to detail that Gotham has. I kind of had an idea that it was going to be awesome when I found out they were filming a lot in cities in Scotland and kind of the Gothic architecture that is there. I think that the environment of this movie and the immersiveness of it is one of the strongest things is Matt Reeves wasn't lying. I mean, you really are in this movie, just like the atmosphere. It's always raining. It's very immersive, and the score it adds to that. I think particularly the opening with the Batman, it's so immersive, and you get chills. I'm going to go over my favorite scenes, so I don't want to go into that too much. I think that we can all agree that it's very immersive, and that Gotham really is its own character, and it really kind of sets the movie apart from a lot of its predecessors. The cinematography is, and I don't know if I spelled it right, but it is so well done. The camera mounts on vehicles, the angles, the lighting on Batman's cowl. It's all so perfectly done. Almost every shot is a masterpiece. And something I also kind of appreciated, I do like that Zack Snyder's movies kind of have like a filter on them to where like the camera is kind of showing maybe more of a bluish tint or a reddish tint, but I did kind of appreciate that this one didn't have one. It made it seem more real. I feel like most movies today have that, and most TV shows have that tinted look, and I kind of appreciated that this one didn't. So the score and the sound effects are, I think, I was telling my wife, I don't think that there's ever been a movie that has utilized sound like this movie has. This movie, I mean, spoiler review, just the way Batman walks, you can hear every footstep. And I really love the shots, going back to cinematography, where it's like just his boots like going through the rainy water. And you can hear it. You can hear the leather moving against itself, almost in every scene that Batman or Catwoman is in their suits in. It's really nice. Riddler's breathing is super creepy. They even put Riddler's breathing in the background of the funeral scene when he's like looking up at Riddler in the balcony. Riddler's like breathing is going on, even though you wouldn't actually be hearing him doing that, but it kind of like adds that creepiness and that vibe and just that immersiveness to it. And so just like the little like sound effects and things, I think that the score is one of the best scores for a Batman movie we've ever had. I think if you look up the video on YouTube that is the whole score in one video, I think 33:30 is when the Batman chase part of the soundtrack starts, and I think that's when it's at its peak. And so all of these things, Gotham, the environment, the immersiveness, the cinematography, the sound and score and the effects are all 10 out of 10. Perfect. Couldn't be any better. I actually watched a video where I found out that the Batmobile sound is actually a bottle rocket going off. When the blue flame engine goes off, that sound I guess was inspired by a bottle rocket video that they slowed down and warped a little bit to sound a little bit, in my opinion, like an airplane engine. But that's why it's so unique, because it's technically not an airplane engine. It's technically a bottle rocket going off. But the two best scenes for me in the whole movie was the opening Batman intro. technically the intro to the movie is Riddler killing, the mayor. And although I did actually jump when like Riddler shows up behind him, I thought that was an excellent intro to the character. I also, but like the Batman intro to me is the best Batman introduction to the character we've ever seen. The use of shadow and how criminals are legitimately scared of him. I thought that that was really, like, we hadn't really seen that to this degree. And like the shot where it's like the drop head guy who's wearing the same outfit that Robert Pattinson's character wears in Good Times. It's kind of a funny thing, but when he looks up at the bat sigil and is just looking at like the drop head mask and the rain and everything, I don't know why, but that's one of my favorite shots like ever. I don't know why, I just think it looks so good. Him looking up at the bat sigil with fear and then looking at the dark alley and all the rain and everything. It just kind of goes, I think that's the scene where the atmosphere and the immersiveness are like at its peak. Not that the rest of the movie isn't, but this scene really stuck out, and you kind of knew right away, okay, this is going to be really, really awesome. And Batman narrating it, I really, really liked that. I had a conversation with my dad several months before this movie came out, where I'd seen one of the trailers, and I was like, I kind of seemed like they might do this, and I really hope that they do, because it happens a lot in the Batman comic books, especially like the Long Halloween and Scott Snyder's run. Batman doesn't talk a lot. He's more of a quiet, stoic figure, which I thought Pattinson nailed in this. So we get to hear his internal thoughts, and I thought that the narration parts of this movie were just spectacular, and I would love to see more of that. Even just throughout the whole movie, like different journal entries. I just really like that. I think it makes it very personal. And for a movie called The Batman, and I think that this movie feels like the Batman movie more than in the others, because he's almost in every scene, I think that it's fitting to have that. My second favorite scene, if not tied with it, is the Batmobile scene. There is not a Batmobile that I would want to drive more than this one. With the sound, again, and this is the reason why I started with the previous slide first, because it kind of impacts everything below. But the sound of the Batmobile is so weaponized, and it's so powerful, and the visuals are so powerful. I tried to find a GIF where it's like it's mounted on the back and it's like driving through, but the fire's not going, and that just all of the shots, the cinematography of that scene, the score of that scene, the intensity of that scene, Batman's face in that scene. I mean, there is nothing wrong with that scene. Batman doesn't kill anybody. I mean, Penguin probably does. But, like, it's just so good. And, like, the car feels so real. And I really want to drive this car. Like, I really want to sit in it. And even if it doesn't actually shoot fire, I want to push the thing. And, it's just the way that it's built. It just looks so cool. And it's even cooler when you know from the pre-novel that Batman built it himself. And I'll get into this later, but in that scene when he gets the Penguin, the fear in Penguin's eyes is just so perfect. That's what the relationship of Batman and his rogue should be, is there should be that absolute terror. And Colin Farrell really gets that in that moment when Batman's approaching him, right? And then he like looks down and the rain's like dripping on him. First of all, the atmosphere is amazing in that. But Colin Farrell's face, pretty much every scene Colin Farrell, his face is pretty on point. But this one, it really communicates the fear that Batman puts into criminals. And I really, really liked it. So those are my two favorite scenes. Let's talk about my next favorite thing about the movie, and that's Batman himself. Robert, I kind of thought it was funny. His name would also, you could call him Bob, because Robert is long for Bob, right? I'm pretty sure, yeah. So it's kind of funny. He just doesn't look like a Bob at all. But the bat suit, I think that the BVS bat suit is tied. I don't know which one I like more. The BVS suit, to me, is just the perfect iteration of The Dark Knight Returns. And it's kind of funny. I know Scott Snyder or Zack Snyder has said he wants to do Batman Return. He would love to do a live action Batman Returns. I'm like, I feel like you've already mostly done it. But you could still do it, I guess. But anyway, Pattinson's suit it's very flattering to him. It makes him feel very broad and strong and imposing. When he goes into the Iceberg Lounge, which I love that they use that name because that's totally comic book and the Arkham games, but although I would have loved for it to have more of an ice feel to it. But when he first goes in there and he's just like, he looks so big and so powerful, and the way he just goes to the front door, and I will mention Batman's lack of stealth in this movie, but just the Batsuit looks so good to the point of I'm actually going to be slowly paying for a very expensive statue of the character because the suit to me is just so cool, and I love how practical it is. I love that the collar makes it to where his neck doesn't look super thin, but so that he can still move around. That's what that collar does, is they made it to where he can move around, but if you didn't have that collar, it'd probably look like the Christian Bale Dark Knight suit, where it looks like it's a lollipop on a rather skinny neck, So I like the Batsuit quite a bit. And with Robert Pattinson's performance, I love that he's quiet, he's reserved, he's in control of his emotions for the most part. But whenever you look at his face, when you look into his eyes, you can see that there's a deep-seated rage. And when he's actually fighting criminals, you can see that there is a rage in there. But I like how he's kind of quiet and collected during the detective scenes and very intelligent because, he figures out those riddles super quickly. Because, that's what Batman is kind of supposed to be. I like how his arc ends and what where it leaves things. Kind of him deciding, well, I'm not going to be vengeance, I'm going to be hope, and probably the extension of that will be justice. I'd love to see that kind of challenged in the next movie, where maybe kind of like in The Dark Knight, where people's opinions of him kind of shift by the end, maybe he's not this hero. I'd kind of like to see that. I don't want them to lose the fear aspect. He can be an object of hope, but I still want him to be an element of fear to the criminal world. But I do like that in the beginning introduction to him, Batman saves this guy and the guy says, "Don't hurt me." And at the end, that girl is holding his arm, and it was a very touching moment. If you really pay attention to where he's placing his hands and where, he's holding her hand until the I think until the scene cuts out or the helicopter leaves. I don't know which it is, but it was very touching. And that's being said, his facial expressions and the emotions that he places through his eyes, that scene when he's looking at the kid, and you can see the moisture in his eyes and just the sadness on his face. Again, I've never seen an actor communicate so much emotion with so little movement in their face. And that is a compliment, and it's an intense compliment. I think probably when that was firing on when it was at its best was with the Alfred scene in the hospital, because Robert Pattinson really doesn't move his face too much, but the way he's talking, it's you can tell he's really mad and he's holding it in. His chin is moving, his jaw is clenching. Every subtle little movement in his face in that scene is communicating so much. And I feel in that moment, it was really touching. Both Andy Serkis and Pattinson do such a good job in that scene and their facial expressions and everything. And then the scene in Arkham with Riddler, first of all, Riddler's performance in that scene was just breathtaking. But specifically Pattinson, when he thinks that Riddler has figured out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, just the concern and the worry and the fear on his face that this thing that he cares so much about might be ending. I thought that was really powerful. Like from the moment that he's in Riddler's apartment and he's thinking that this Batman thing is going to end, to right before Riddler says, and we almost got him. We got them all, though, didn't we? Almost all of them, though, didn't we? Um, Batman's mannerisms, Pattinson's mannerisms, and that whole stint of scenes is so good. And you can just tell how important Batman is to him in that moment. Because he seems like Batman is scared for really the first and only time in the movie. And I thought that he conveyed those facial expressions so well. And all of these scenes, and like his scenes with Catwoman where he's like, oh, you're a real, she's like, you really don't care what happens to me. And he's like, look at me. And she thinks that he's like about to tell him that, I do care about you. And he's just like, yeah, no, the context is good. Like, even things like that and how their relationship goes and develops, it's all just, I really care about this Batman. I really feel like I know him. You know what I mean? Like Michael Keaton's Batman, obviously you love your Batman. You love your Michael Keaton. Maybe not George Clooney. I don't know. But you even love your Adam West Batman. But like with this Batman, and I would say Ben Affleck as well, and Christian Bale, they all do this, but with Affleck and Bale, it's more of a Bruce Wayne, him. With this, it's like I feel like I know Batman better than I ever have before. Not Bruce Wayne, but Batman. And I would argue that Batman is the truer self. So I really like that about Pattinson's Batman, is that I feel like I really know his heart. And I just think that's so invaluable. I really liked that. Like with Ben Affleck's, like I could really feel his rage, and just like, and I really love Ben Affleck's Batman. And I really love Christian Bale's Batman. But this is you get to see his heart. In BVS, you kind of get to see his rage and kind of more of like a wizened Batman. And this, you kind of see his early, like, his heart. And I really appreciated that. So going into the different aspects of what makes Batman Batman, obviously Robert Pattinson's Batman is the peak epitome of detective Batman that we've seen out of any live action take on the character. So obviously that would be a 10 out of 10. His combat, I thought that Ben Affleck's Batman warehouse scene is still the king of all Batman fight scenes. And the Bale movies have some pretty, I'll get to that in a moment, pretty decent combat. But the thing about the Nolan movies is the camera work is so shaky, and I'll get to why they do that in a moment, but it hides how maybe not impressive the Bale fight scenes maybe actually are. If you look up, people have done on YouTube where they kind of like remove the shaky camera, and it really doesn't look that amazing. The Pattinson fight scenes are brief. I wish there was more. I wish he had the equivalent of a warehouse scene. But I do like that he struggles. He takes hits. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Nobody, Bob Odenkirk, where he takes it almost as much as he gets. And I did like how, if you really look at, you see people that Batman has fought later in the movie, and almost all of them have like some really brutally broken noses. And I like that. And something that both BVS and this did is when Batman punches, there's almost like a spray of moisture of like when they get punched. It's like, and I really like that. And I really liked how Batman's foot falls, you just feel the weight of this imposing figure. So combat, I thought, was pretty good because the camera angles actually let us see what was going on. But I still think Ben Affleck's is better at the combat. But Pattinson does get a bump up because he doesn't kill anybody. At least I'm pretty sure that that one Riddler guy pulled the trigger. Batman didn't mean for the other guy to get shot. And I mean, at a certain level, you have to be realistic. Like him moving out of the way, like what else could he possibly have done? Realistically, I don't think that makes Pattinson responsible for those deaths. Certainly not Penguin's Batmobile scene. I don't think I would place any blame on Batman for that. That was all Penguin. Stealth. This is where Pattinson's Batman is at the worst. And this is where Bale's Batman is at the best. And that's Bale's Batman fight scenes were kind of to try to communicate the stealth aspect, ninja aspect, even in combat. And that scene in Batman Begins where he catches Carmine Falcone is still the best stealth Batman scene maybe ever. Although maybe that scene in The Dark Knight when he takes out Joker. But I mean, it's just so Batman, and we didn't really see any of that in this movie. And it's fitting for the character because this Batman, as he says, I don't care what happens to me, I don't care if I die. He almost is welcoming the pain. He almost wants it. So he kind of just charges headlong into it. He's not really interested in stealth. I hope that they make that better in future movies, because if they do, if they continue and expand on the combat and they make him more stealthy, not necessarily ninja, but stealthy. We did kind of see some stealth in the elevator scene with all the guns, but still not really. I would like to see more of those two things, especially the stealth. Because, yes, Batman is the world's greatest detective, but there is more to the character. So that's really my only critique of his, and it's not even Pattinson's performance. That was creative decisions, and maybe they're going to build up to that. Gadgets were on point. I would have loved to see him use the thing in his holster, which is a sticky bomb gun. I would have loved to see him use that. Maybe he did use it on the ceiling with the glass in the garden, central garden or whatever. But maybe that scene was cut. I don't know. But I would love to see that. I'd love to see his Bruce Wayne actually exist. I like what they did for this movie. You did it. It was awesome. I love it. But now that you've established that, we can move on and he can develop more of a Bruce Wayne persona. I've heard in interviews that they're not going to do the Playboy millionaire thing, and I'm fine with that. But he still needs to almost be like Robert Pattinson from Tenet, a little bit more like him. And I think Pattinson is up for that challenge where he can make it seem fake. I think that the actor that has done that the best was Christian Bale. The only issue with that is, with Christian Bale's Batman, it seemed like Bruce Wayne was more of the normal. There wasn't a huge distinction between Bruce Wayne when he's with just Alfred and Bruce Wayne when he's with a bunch of people. I mean, that's not fair. I guess there is. But anyway, Pattinson's needs to be worked out a little bit. And that's not to say I didn't like what was in this movie. It's just going forward, I would like to see his Bruce Wayne actually exist. And I know they're going for more of like a Kurt Cobain, like loner rock star. But you can still, I think with the way the movie ends, I think that he sees he can do more to instill hope. And maybe that would naturally go into Bruce Wayne. Kind of like what you see in the Earth One comic books. And I'd like to see his Bruce Wayne get fleshed out a little bit. I'd like to see Wayne Enterprises a little bit more integrated. Maybe a Lucius Fox. I don't know. I do kind of like that Batman makes a lot of the stuff himself. I really like that. Love the Batcave. And his apartment. People like, who would live in that? I would live in that. The broodiness was really well done. There were a few scenes I thought it was a little too much, where it wasn't executed, like when he goes to see Carmine Falcone, he just leaves the hair on in front of his eyes. Of like, it was a little. There was a few lines that might have been delivered where it was a little too broody and moody, but overall, excellent. So moving on to the Riddler, Paul Dano is really a stand-up performance. He took a character that really did not interest me and made him one of the best. I think with any Batman villain, you need to be able to relate to the character and where they're coming from, but obviously not condone the methods of which they go about to fix that. So I totally agree with Riddler. that there's all this corruption in the world, and that it's annoying, and that it needs to be addressed and exposed. And sometimes it's mind-boggling the extent of which people will go to ignore obvious corruption in our political figures. The Clintons are probably the most glaring. I don't know how people like this. They're so bad, and I don't know how people can just ignore that. And I'm sure from the other side of the spectrum, people feel the same way about many Republican candidates. But the Clintons, to me, are probably what sticks out the most, just because I grew up in the 90s and Bill Clinton and all that stuff. So the Riddler doesn't look comic book accurate, but he's comic book accurate in every way that counts. In a way that is so sadistic. I love the rat trap thing. That's so sadistic. I wish we could have seen a better... when it comes out on streaming, I'd like to pause to see the picture of the police commissioner's face after the rats got him, because I'm kind of curious as to what that looked like. But I loved how sadistic he was. I loved how he had to leave riddles. He had to leave clues. I like how he thought that Batman was on his side. And the performance of when he realizes that Batman isn't could have very easily, another actor doing that, it could have very easily just come out look like terribly. But Paul Dano really, like the smiles and his his breathing, and it's all so creepy, but so real. A reviewer, Grace Randolph, pointed out that she liked how clean his hair looked and how he looked clean. I was like, I kind of like that too. Kind of just, he feels so real, but in just the creepiest way. And it is also true that, we have these horrible things going on, corruption and all these things. So it is relatable, but you don't condone how he goes about doing it. And by the way, I like how Catwoman was like, I think you would agree with him. Like, I think that, I kind of already touched on that. I think that Catwoman kind of agreeing with him it was a nice touch. It was like, she's not wrong. I mean, the Riddler has a good point. Obviously, the extent of which he's going is wrong. And I like how Batman's like, absolutely no, what he's doing is wrong. He may be right, but it's wrong. And Catwoman's like, is it though? Like, it kind of was like the different stages. Like, Riddler has a point to make, but the way he goes about it is pure evil. Catwoman's the gray area, and Batwoman's like, no, this is wrong. We need to stop this. No killing, right? And I feel like that kind of articulates the relationship with them very well and how it should be. Batman's relationship with Riddler is very good. It's what it should be. The Riddler originally thinks that Batman and him are on the same side, that they're equally intelligent, and then when they kind of realize that they're not, I can kind of see the Riddler going down the path of, that traditional Riddler of, I want to defeat you because I'm the superior intellect. But I kind of liked how he really did believe that Batman was on his side. And again, I absolutely love the reaction to Riddler finding out that Batman wasn't on his side was just, he was everything the Riddler should be, except, maybe his appearance, which I think they might maybe fix in future iterations. Not that I don't like this one, I actually really like it. I have a keychain Riddler, I have the Funko Pop Riddler. I really like his look. But I think now that he doesn't really have a need to hide his identity, maybe he won't have to wear the mask and he can maybe have something that's a little bit more traditional Riddler. Just a little bit. I don't want to see spandex. Batman's relationship with Catwoman is very well done too. I've kind of touched on that, and I've touched on the Penguin. That fear when he's in the car is so well done. It's just perfect. Now, speaking of Catwoman, she's so feline in the way she moves, and Zoe Kravitz, her Catwoman really feels like a real person. I didn't really care for the white privilege line, but when I was in the movie theater seeing it for the first time, but in hindsight, it makes sense because I mean, white privilege does exist. I don't think it exists to the extent that a lot of people play it up to be. I think that true privilege usually comes from wealth, which I think more applies to this movie. But I can see how she might see it that way, and I also like that evidence that that's not completely true is literally the person that she's staring at, and she even includes Bruce Wayne on the list of people that deserve what's coming because they don't do anything. They're these white privilege, blah, blah, blah. Well, the evidence against that not being an absolute is right in front of her, and I kind of like the irony of that. It kind of, to me, accentuates that she's not perfect. All of these characters are very flawed, and I really like that. Batman's flawed, he makes mistakes. I would like to see that improve because I don't know. I would like to see Batman a little bit more competent, but it's year two. It's totally acceptable. But yeah, Catwoman, I thought she was absolutely excellent. I would love to see more. I'd love to see her get a full, actual Catwoman uniform. They've said that this is kind of like the pre-uniform. She's not actually Catwoman yet. So I'd love to see her get her HBO Max show and see more. I think Zoe Kravitz is a really down-to-earth person, and the interviews I see with her, she just seems like just such a nice person. And I would really like to see her continue. Because Michelle Pfeiffer is still probably my favorite, but I think if Zoe Kravitz continued, and if they gave her like a long Halloween-inspired Catwoman suit, I would absolutely die. And I'm not a fan of the pixie cut. I just don't like pixie cuts, so I would like to see longer hair, but I mean, she wears wigs, so I mean, it's fine. It's whatever. It's a very minor nitpick. Penguin, I liked his humor. I liked what he had. I thought that Colin Farrell just really did a good job when he's like, I'm Oz, like his teeth were really good. I like that he's an arms dealer. I like that he is what Penguin is in the comic books, especially Earth 1 comic books. I'm absolutely looking forward to more. Every scene that Colin Farrell is in, his facial expressions and how he's able to use this character, which looks nothing like him, is just so, it blew my mind. I can't rave enough. And that Batmobile scene when Batman catches him and the fear that's in his eyes and the smugness that he has when he's in the club, it's so Penguin. And that's the relationship. When Batman takes Penguin down, that's the relationship that they should have. And also when they were interrogating him. Falcone, really good. I thought that the Catwoman having, being his daughter was a nice pull from the Long Halloween comic book, and I liked that how Falcone manipulated Bruce into making him think that Maroni was the one that killed his parents, and just the whole thing. Something I would want to know is, was Edward Elliot actually under Maroni's payroll? You don't really know because Falcone's not a very trustworthy source. But I thought it was perfectly depicted straight out of the Long Halloween. I have no complaints. I thought that the reveal of the Martha being in Arkham, I loved that. I love the Earth 1 comic books, and I love that they pulled that in. I really liked that. And I thought Falcone just, every scene that he was in, he did what he needed to do. He was a more comic accurate Falcone than what we saw in Batman Begins, although I do maybe like that Falcone a little bit more because the comic book, I don't know, they're actually even for me because they're just, one's not very comic book accurate, the other is, but I still like both of them. Jeffrey Wright is Gordon, no complaints. I love his humor. I love his dry humor. I love that scene when Pattinson punches him in the face. I love the humor of Riddler, having the thumb drive and the way Pattinson delivers that line, like leather sound, thumb drive, and Gordon's reaction to that. I think the only thing I would like to see more with Gordon is to humanize him a little bit more. I did like lines where he was like, no guns. And Gordon's like, no, man, that's your thing. Or, when he's like, I've known you for 2 years. I don't even know your name, man. Like, he's I would like to see. I like what he's the foundation of that, but I'd like to see, like, does he have a wife? Does he have a daughter? Like, that's something I liked about Gordon from Batman Begins, is we got a more of a human, like, other, like, who he is outside of work, and I liked that. I think that humanizes the character more, and I'm fully sure that Jeffrey Wright could nail that, for sure. I think he did an excellent job. Alfred Andy Serkis, every scene he was in, especially that scene in the hospital, obviously is where I think anybody with a heart would tear up a little bit. But even like when he notices the contact lens, which I think maybe if he had like a night vision, I could turn that white so you could have both the emotion and also have the wide eyes. Anyway, when he's looking at it, he's seeing like the little kid in there, and he like turns down. Like, I felt like you could really feel the emotion in his performance, and it was really quite good. And then just a special shout out. I really liked Martinez. I think that was his name. But he's like the side cop that we see where he's like, hey, Mr. Wayne. Like, he's through the movie. I kind of like him. He even has an arc of his own. And I kind of like that every character in this movie has an arc. Martinez starts out really hating Batman, and he kind of comes around to him. And I just like him. I like that all the cops have like mustaches. It's so great. I just love it. So closing thoughts. The plot, I think the first act, the second act, and the third act are all great. I know some people have said that the third act was weak, but I have to disagree. It felt weak the first time I saw it because I missed so much. Upon repeat viewings, I've caught on to so much more. In fact, even this fourth time I saw it, I caught on to the cop that Catwoman has such, almost shoots in the head and kicks off the ledge. But obviously Batman saves him. But the fourth time seeing it, I connected, oh, that's the cop that he's at the drug drop with Penguin and the Batmobile, and he's actually the guy that Catwoman hits with the motorcycle. That's him. And then the first three times, admittedly the third time, there was a lot of people talking, and I was very distracted, so I didn't catch a lot of things the third time. I didn't connect that how Catwoman got her phone back. But this time I heard the cop's voice. I noticed the cop's voice, not just Falcone's voice in the phone recording. I noticed that Catwoman said that he had her phone, and that's how she got it back. And that he was the one that kind of kidnapped her roommate and all that. So kind of that cop's role. I did catch on to the basics of it the first time, but this time I really caught on to the details of it. And the second time watching it, I really caught on to the Riddler's plot. And I really do think the third act still stands just as good as the other three. The other two. And I think once you really fully grasp Riddler's plot and the point that he wants to wash Gotham clean, that unmasking isn't enough, that there needs to be punishment, that we've been suffering all this time and we've been asking why us, and now it's time for them to ask why them. We're going to punish them. It was kind of Riddler's attempt at bringing real change. He honestly believes it doesn't matter who wins the mayor spot. It's going to be corrupt. It's always going to be corrupt. So we need to bring real change. We need to scare people and punish them. And so it actually makes quite a bit of sense. And I thought his plan was quite brilliantly put. I do think it is unfortunate that Batman's solving the riddle had to do with Martinez pointing out what that tool was. But if you really think about it, it didn't make a whole lot of a difference because right when Batman figures it out, the bombs go off. So it could have been that he could have never, made that connection. It still would have resulted in the same ending, really. So it was just a nice touch that he got to figure it out, and we got some cool character development there. I liked Barry Keoghan's Joker. I've seen some interviews with Matt Reeves on what he wants to do with it, and I think that it's pretty neat. I hope that he's not just setting this up to not do anything with it. I would really like to see this play out. I know the Arkham show, maybe he'll show up. I don't know what their plans are with that. I really hope that Batman shows up at least obscurely in these spin-off shows. It kind of seems weird that Penguin would be rising to power in his show and then Batman would never show up to do anything about it. It seems kind of weird if they did it that way, but I'm excited for what's next. I want to see Batman become more stealthy. I'd love to see more gadgets. Um, I don't. I'm nervous of changing the Batsuit because I love this one so much, but maybe there could be a few upgrades. I'd love to see him have batarangs. He doesn't really have any batarangs. I guess that kind of goes with the stealth part. I'd love to see... Scarecrow's my favorite villain, so I'd love to see Scarecrow show up. I don't think he will. Maybe he'll show up in the Arkham show as like a psychologist at Arkham. I don't know. Two-Face could be interesting, although I'm kind of burnt out on Two-Face because I think he was done so well in the Dark Knight. I'm totally open to Reeves' idea of doing Mr. Freeze next. I don't think that Mr. Freeze can be a solo character. I think you need somebody else that maybe Mr. Freeze would end up teaming up with Batman to stop. Maybe that's the Court of Owls. I really, 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 really do not want to see Hush. I know people want that, but I just don't. I just never find the character that interesting. He's kind of reminiscent of Riddler. Riddler was even him at one point. I think the Court of Owls and Hush would almost be redundant. Like, oh, more corruption. Like, well, we just did that. We don't want the same thing every time. So the next movie, I hope for more stealth things. I hope for more combat, longer fight scenes. The runtime didn't bother me at all. I love long movies. It didn't even feel long, and I've seen it 4 times. And I think the 4th time was probably my favorite time viewing it because I was at an IMAX matinee showing, and me and like maybe 15 other people were the only people there, and it was just absolutely incredible. So I really liked the plot very much. So what's my score out of 5? Let me think if there's anything else I wanted to say. I like the plot and how it kind of just points out the lies and corruption that I think is very relatable to current politics. You have people like Bernie Sanders who says, tax the rich, tax millionaires, but you can go on his Twitter and as soon as he becomes a millionaire, he starts saying, tax billionaires, but he doesn't advertise his hypocrisy of owning several houses and how he's actually quite rich. And AOC is in the same category. So I just think that it makes a valid point that maybe we should pay more attention to the corruption around us and maybe it should bother us more. Maybe not go to the extent of Riddler, but and I also like that they keep it apolitical. It's, Republicans are going to see, oh, well, that's like the Clintons, that's like Bernie Sanders. Democrats are going to see, oh, that's like Donald Trump, that's like Ted Cruz, that's like blah, blah, blah. And I think that's all. I like that it can be taken either way. And I liked that about Joker too, that it wasn't just corrupt businessmen, it was corrupt TV show hosts, which kind of to me relates. I don't really see a lot of late night show hosts in a very positive light. I think they're kind of scummy. So I kind of like the vibe that they're going with there. So my score out of 5, for a Batman movie, I have to give it like almost 5 bats, because I would like to see more stealth. I would have liked to see more stealth, and I would have liked to see more fight scenes. And maybe I both liked and didn't like that he wasn't maybe as competent as other Batman. And maybe Pattinson was a little too moody at certain times with some line deliveries, but that's being really, really nitpicky. If I'm giving something almost 5 out of 5, I must really like it. And I don't think I've ever seen any movie in the theater 4 times. So I think that speaks volumes to itself. Overall movie, taking Batman out of the equation, I would say 4.5. There's some moments where maybe it's not very tense, and maybe some people, not me, might lose interest or focus. Other people might feel the runtime. I don't, but I'm trying to look at it from an objective standpoint. It just take a little bit of points off for maybe there's a few moments where it's not very suspenseful, which I and other people obviously look for in an action movie, which this may be a detective noir, but it is also an action movie. So that's my review, spoiler review of The Batman. I know I probably didn't get into too many spoilers, but I also feel like this movie doesn't actually have too many spoilers. You know what I mean? That is my 50-minute review of The Batman. If you watched the whole thing, bravo. I'll see you guys later.